Hello Pre-Algebra students. I am making this video to help you prepare for your Chapter 7 test, which you're going to be taking on Monday. I'm responding to some of your questions that you've had. Want to go back over a couple of sections that's covered in here, not by section number, but because the problems that are needed. And also in here, I have included, someone else asked when you have to distribute and when you have variables on both sides. So all that's covered in here. I am listening to you and hopefully being able to cover your needs. But what I'd like you to do as you go through these is pause and try to do the problems, and then make sure that you can, if you know how to on certain ones, you can spend as much time or as little as possible. Now, showing steps on both sides of an equation. Make sure that whenever you have an equal, you are showing steps. I can tell by the responses that I got that some of you are doing a great job with that, but some of you need a little work. So we're just going to take a quick look at these things. All right, so remember we're doing the same side. You always have to keep it balanced. So if I need to take away a 14 on this side to try and get the x by itself, I have to take away the 14 on this side. Once again, showing your steps. When you take -4 minus 14 for over here, you're thinking of being on the number line at -4 and going 14 further, so that would be -28. And you'd have -3x here. No, not -28, sorry, -18. Let me change that. This is why it's good to work in pencil, because then you can erase. So I've got my virtual pencil here, -18. So 14 and 4 is 18. And then in order to solve this, we need to then divide by -3 because that undoes your multiplying. So -18 divided by -3, negative divided by negative gives you positive, and you would get a +6 here as your answer. If you needed to check, you would take that answer and put it back into your equation and solve it that way. Okay? So like this. Sorry, I'm having a little technical difficulty, so I apologize for the slight bit of distraction, but that's being taken care of right now. Okay, so like I said, if you're going to check it, you go right back to the original, and the check is for your benefit so that you can check to make sure that you've got the right answer. So -3 times 8 is, sorry, -3 times 6, because you're plugging in the answer that you got. I don't know what I was thinking on 8. Is -18 plus 14, which gives you -4. All right, now I can move along clearly. 7x minus 10. You're always looking for what you can do to get the variable by itself. So here we have this -10 to get rid of, so you add 10 to both sides. This is a little easier. 4 plus 10, 14. 7x equals 14, so you divide both sides. You're always doing the same thing to both sides of the equation. Same thing to both sides of the equation. Let's put a line in here so that you don't get confused with seeing too much altogether. There's one problem. Here's another problem. We'll partition it off. I'm going to scroll this up a little so that we're just looking at this. All right, same thing to both sides of the equation. You've got an equal side. It has to stay balanced. So if you're trying to get this x by itself, we're going to get rid of the 8. But we get rid of it there, we get rid of it there. And that gives you 32. 4x equals 32. We divide both sides by 4. And that gives us 8. Over here, you've got a minus. When you're going to get rid of a minus, you have to add. So I'll add 12 to both sides. And I will continue to say to both sides, to both sides, to both sides. Negative 57 plus 12. You're thinking of being all the way over on the left at negative 57 on your number line and coming up back towards the 0. So you're going to take 57 minus 12. That'll tell you where you land on the negative side. So we get negative 45. Then divide by negative 5. Again, everything has to happen on both sides of the equal sign in order for that to work. So x equals 9 on this one. You need to make sure you're being very, very careful on your work. And once again, you can always go back and check. The check is for you to make sure that you've gotten the right answer. So if I'm doing this one, I'm taking my 9, I'm plugging it back in to make sure that this gives me 57. 5 times 9 is 45 minus 12. Keep, change like you guys like to do. 45, 57, negative 57. And that was the answer you were looking for. So it checks out. So you can always be sure before you actually submit an answer that you're correct because you've gone back and you've done the checks. All right, moving right along. I've got an awful lot of example problems here for you, so you should be very well prepared for this once you're done. All right, once again, you're trying to get the variable by itself, so sometimes you might have to do something like add. Sometimes you might have to subtract. You're always trying to do the opposite of what's there. So we're left with this a divided by 9 because these two cancel out. That's a 9 there. It's not another a. This equals 20. Then when you're done there, again, you've got to do the same thing to both sides. To get rid of a divided by 9, you do times 9. So a equals 20 times 9. 20 times 9. 180. Okay, this is the same type of thing. If you could anticipate what to do, I'll ask you the question, what do? You get rid of the 5. In order to get rid of a plus 5, you subtract 5. Do that on both sides. Make sure you're showing your steps. Think about that straw that we put down in the middle so that you've got a divided up thing here. All right, so then in order to get the divided by 8, to get that to disappear, remember to undo divided by 8, you multiply by 8, and you do that on both sides, keeping whatever you do on one side of the equals, you have to do it on the other side. And we get 88 right there. Okay, this one is somewhat similar. I'm saving this one for last because it's a little bit different. Here we need to get rid of a minus, so you add it. Plus 9 on this side, plus 9 on this side. We're left with c over 7. Negative 10 plus 9 turns out to be negative 1. You can imagine on your number line negative 10 and coming up back towards 0, 9, and you end up with negative 1. And then multiply both sides times 7. And that'll give us c equals negative 7, because negative times positive is negative. And then we've got this particular type where you've got divided by, but you have a group. Okay, don't forget, if you have a group, this is a grouping symbol too. You're dividing by 5 and you're getting rid of that. So we're going to multiply both sides times 5. We need to take 14 times 5, so we'll do that carefully. and that gives us 70. So this is going to give us x plus 2. That's what's left up there. And then you're left with doing just one step, taking away 2 from both sides. X equals 68. So that we were still working on that before we even were outside of each other's presence. So that one, that is definitely covered in your test. The other thing that we need to go back over is how to handle when you have, when you're trying to find circumference. So our directions for these problems are find the circumference and round to the nearest tenth. Now we know that you can have a decimal form and you can have a fraction form for pi. 3.14 is our approximate pi for the decimal form, 22/7 for the fraction form if you prefer that one. And we'll just take a look here and see what makes sense. We have two different formulas that really are the same. One of them is that the circumference equals pi times the diameter. And that's good to use if you're given the diameter. Another way that you can see that is circumference equals 2 times pi times r. Once again, reviewing these concepts. So since we're given a diameter here, we're going to make our circumference equal pi times 3.5. So what we're really doing is taking 3.14 and multiplying it times 3.5 carefully. 5 times 4, 20. Carry 7, 15. Placeholder, some people put x's, some people put zeros, but either way, 3 times 4, 12. We have a 1 here now, 3, and 1 more is 4. 3 times 3 is 9. Then we have to figure out where the decimal place goes, 1, 2, 3 place values. So about 10.99. Now this one's interesting because it says round to the nearest tenth. So if we want to round to the nearest tenth here, we look to the right, it says to bump that up. So if we bump this number up though, it ends up bumping this one up. So our approximate value is 11. Just to review the rules of rounding on that one. So even though you rounded to the nearest tenth here, it does bump all the way up to 11 for that. Okay, so I have a radius now of 4.3. We're given the radius, so you're going to want to do 2 pi r times 4.3. It's easier to multiply 2 times the 4.3 first, so I'm going to take this as 8.6 times pi. Then we want to take our 3.14 and multiply it times 8.6. Let's multiply carefully. 6 times 4, 24. 6 plus 2 is 8. 6 times 3, 18. 8 times 4, 32. 8 times 1 is 8. Plus 3 is 11. 24 plus 1 is 25. We add them up. And I know that probably not very many of you still need this review, but there might be somebody it might be helpful. I need to carry another 1. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3 place values. So if we're rounding to the tenths place here, this one also, the circumference comes out to be about equal to 27.0 on this one in inches. So you multiply out, you do round. Sometimes you'll get a number in the tenths place, sometimes you won't. Here in the picture form, you have to figure out whether it's a radius or diameter you're given. This one happens to be a radius. So our circumference equals 2 times pi times 8, which is 16 times 8, 16 times pi, sorry. So we're taking 3.14 times 16, 24, 8, 18, 4, 1, 3, 4, 0, 5. Oops, I got the decimal in the wrong place. Now that's something that's easy to do because we've been doing 3 place values, but look here, we just have 16. So 1, 2, here's our decimal place right here. Now here's a good thing where estimating can help you out, because you know that 16 times 3 is definitely not going to be 5. So it's good to rethink where you threw that decimal at the end and just make sure you're in the ballpark. Okay, so there's your reason, your whole reason for estimating. If we're going to the 10th place, this is below 5, so we keep the decimal at that place, so we get 50.2 feet. All right, and then here 28. Now we said, okay, we have pi times d because it's 28. Some of you might say, wait a minute, I know also that 22/7 is an approximation for pi. So if you were to have something like this and you notice that this is a multiple of 7, it's probably a lot easier to just multiply, to do this, and you can cancel out because 7 goes into numerator and denominator. And this will give us 88 meters for our circumference going around this circle. So as you can see, some of the things are easier to calculate, some are more difficult, and so you just need to make sure you're working carefully. All right, variable on both sides. This was specifically somebody's question. You've got a variable on both sides, so you have to make your problem so you have a variable just on one side. So I need to take away 3x from both sides. And by the way, on your quiz, I was pretty generous when I said, what do you do on both sides? You gave a lot of good answers that weren't what I expected, but it did show that you understood the process. So on both sides, I take away 3x, or I subtract 3x, and I get 5. And then on both sides, I add 5. And we have 5x equals 40. And then we need to undo the multiplying, you need to divide. And that gives you x equals 8. Remember, you're not ever thinking, I want to solve this whole problem all at once. You're thinking, I want to do the next step. Okay? You're not sitting there and making yourself think until you think of what number you could plug in to get the answer. All right, that's not how you approach these. Approach these one step at a time. What can I do next to try to get myself to the place where I no longer have any numbers in my way? So when you have a variable on both sides, your first thought should be, how do I gather them up on just one side? All right, even when you have decimals, don't let that throw you off. I can still take away 6.3a. And this will give me 9.8 minus 6.3 gives me 3.5a. I still have my minus 7. And I have now, this is gone, and I'm left with minus 28. I did that thing to both sides. I now want to get rid of this minus 7, so I'm going to do plus 7. Once again, you're thinking negative plus positive. I'm going further up from the 28 So I'll get negative 21 when I subtract 28 minus 7. And I realize that my answer is a negative here. My 3.5a comes down. And then you need to undo your multiplication with division. 3.5 divided by 3.5. So we have a negative divided by a positive. We move the decimal point over 1, over 1. So 35 going into 210. You could think through a couple of possibilities. Let's try 6. Because you see that 3 goes into 21 7 times. But it's bigger than 3, so we're going to try 6 and see what happens. 6 times 3 is 30. 18, 19, 21. There we go. So it actually did go in 6 times, but it's negative. You do your division and then you double check on the sign at the end. So you have a negative 6 for that one. It wasn't as bad as it looked at the beginning. Now this last one here on this page is not really very difficult, but sometimes problems like this can trick somebody. So a lot of times when you have just an x, people forget about the hidden 1. So there's really a hidden 1 here. So when I take away x from both sides, I'm taking away 1x. Notice that the variable doesn't have to land on the left. It's sometimes easier to just get rid of the smaller variable. So this gives me x minus 5. And then this one is super easy. We get rid of the minus 5 by adding 5. So your answer turns out to be x equals 8. And we can think it through. 8 plus 3 is 11. 2 times 8 is 16. Minus 5 is 11. They both give you 11. So your answer works out just fine for that one. And it's that variable on both sides. This is where especially showing your steps becomes super important. So please make sure that you're doing that. Even if I'm not looking at the steps help you get the right answer. Okay, let's look at another one. This was something someone specifically asked. So let's take a look here. When you need to distribute in order to solve, you've got a variable in here. You're thinking, wait, I've got variables on both sides. I want to move them. But this one's not free yet until you distribute the 4 in. So I end up with 4b minus 48 because I'm multiplying 4 times 12. I then want to move the b's so that they're on the same side. So I do that again. Whatever you do on one side to move it, you have to do it on the other side. We're trying to get away from the language of move it over, because move it over doesn't really show this whole idea of keeping things balanced. And if you lose the idea that you're keeping that equal sign as being equals, then that will make you run into big trouble later on. Not just in this chapter, but in other years of math that are coming. So please be careful with that. All right, so I'm trying to get rid of this plus 6. So that's a minus 6. And so I've got 3b. And again, negative 48 minus 6 means you're going further down left on your number line. So 48 and 6 end up getting added. And that gives me 54, but it's negative. I then need to divide by 3. I know my answer is going to be negative something. But I need to take 54 divided by 3. Oops, I got an extra bubble on there. So that's a 1. bring down the 4. 3 times 8 is 24. Really getting a workout on these times tables here. All right, so we've got all that happening. Now this one has distributing on both sides, so you have to distribute on both sides before you can really do this problem. 3x minus 12. 3x minus 12. 7x plus 56. Then we will take away 3x from both sides. Minus 12, 4x plus 56. Then we need to take away this 56. You're thinking of yourself starting at negative 12 on the number line and continuing to go further away from 0. We're going 56 further away from 0. You have negative 68. Okay. And then we're going to divide both sides by 4. We know we're going to get a negative something. So 68 divided by 4. 1. 28. 7. So negative 17. So your answers are whatever number you get once you've finally brought it down and gotten the variable completely by itself. All right. Now let's move on. Inequalities are also a thing. These we can run through kind of quickly because really the solving part is the same as it was with the equations, except for you've got inequalities. You just have to watch out for multiplying or dividing by a negative. So I'm going to pull this one out of our way for a second and do our work on this problem. I need to take away 3. So this is greater than 25. So 5x is greater than 25. Divide by 5. Keep in mind that the answer to this is an inequality, not an equals. It's not just 5, it's x is greater than 5. So make sure you show that. I want you on your paper to be able to draw your graph, because that'll be important once we get a chance to see each other again. But here's the thing. You know that on your quiz, I asked you open circle or closed circle. Open circle here because there's no extra or equal to. And then we shade on the right side, and I can't see your graph, but I can ask you a question such as, is 20 in the shaded part of your graph? Well, yeah, 20 is out here. It's shaded. It goes on forever. So yes, 20 would be in the shaded portion of your graph. I could ask you the question, is 3 on the shaded portion of your graph, and your answer to that would be no. So I can ask you questions about your graph, and if you have your graph in front of you, then you can actually see and answer those questions like open circle, closed circle. And that's the way I have to handle that for now, but you'll need to know how to do that for your future maths. I did find a way that you could put in drawings into those Google Forms, but unfortunately everybody'd need to have a Gmail account for that, and I know not everybody does. That's too much for us to handle right now. So looking at this, we're trying to get rid of our 7 first. So we'll add our 7. So less than 10. A divided by 9. It's an A divided by 9. Sorry, my A looks like a 9. Make that a little bit better. So I need to get rid of my A. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 9. Always undoing the work that you've got there. So this is A is less than 90. So we've got this. You know that on this particular problem, you have an open circle again. Less than 90 would be on this side. So if I asked you a question like, is 91 in the shaded portion of your graph, you would say, no, it's not. And if I asked a question like, is 70 in the shaded portion of your graph, you would say, yes, it is. Okay, so once again, different ways of handling these things for different scenarios. I'm going to get rid of this problem. I'm going to bring this problem up to the top. Now this one has to do with both distributing, and it has to do with a whole bunch of other things too with the inequality. So I'm going to distribute this 4, this negative 4, to get negative 4b minus 20 is greater than 6. So I need to then add 20 to both sides. And I get negative 4b is greater than 26. I need to then divide by negative 4. So as I divide by negative 4, this is going to flip over my inequality sign because I divided by a negative. 26 divided by 4 is 6 with a remainder of 2, so 6 2/4, which is 6 1/2. And I don't think I gave you anything that's going to come out with any halves like that for this dividing, but for this example it came out like that. So we've got negative 6 1/2, you've got negative 5 1/2, you've got negative 7 1/2. As you get further from the number line, we have an open circle shaded in on the left side. So once again, you could be asked questions about what is happening on these graphs, and also open circle or closed circle. And then one more in this category. We're getting there, guys. I really applaud you for all of your hard work. You guys are doing fantastic. Super proud of you. All right, so let's look at this. We've got C's on both sides. You can either move it over by subtracting from both sides by doing this way, or you can do it by this way. So if I take away 6C on both sides, if you're going at 2 and you go back 6, you're going to land at negative 4C, greater than or equal to negative 20. And then if I want to continue to solve, I need to take away 4 from both sides. Here we were at negative 20 and we went 4 more to the left. I need to divide by negative 4. Remember, when you multiply or divide by a negative to solve, that's going to flip over your inequality sign. So that gives you 6. Here's where if I asked you the question on your form, do you have an open circle or a closed circle? You have a closed circle. And the closed circle because it says or equal to. And then to the left, so for example, 4 is in the shaded in section and 9 is not in the shaded in section. So you could be asked one of those questions as well to make it accommodate for our distance learning. Okay, now I know that looking at this part, some of you are like, oh man, word problems, that's not our favorite. Well, we're going to have to deal with them all throughout your math, so we should really work on these. These say to write an inequality and solve, so I would be looking for your written inequality and I would be looking for your solution. this shouldn't say inequality, this should be equation. It should say write an equation and solve. Sorry about that. So we're going to write an equation and solve. Ooh, wow. And I can't edit the words, unfortunately, because the way this thing works. So just change that to an equation. All right. So let's get on with it. So we have n equals the number. And it says 2 times an integer. Okay, that's our integer. That's our number. 2n is decreased by means minus 9. And the result is 87. So if it says to write an equation or write an inequality, if it says write an equation, you need to actually show the equation and be able to put that in as part of your answer. And then once you solve it, then you'd be able to give the answer. So I've got 2n over here, 96, and when you divide both sides by 2, n equals 96 divided by 2, and this should be a 4, and this would be an 8, 48. So then your answer would be the number is 48. So when the directions tell you that you need to write an inequality, you have to show the inequality that you are going to write, and then you would have, or the equation, and then you would have to actually solve it so that you have that. So that would be an equation. It might also be that you have an inequality. This one's going to be an inequality. Okay, 4 times the number increased by 8 is at most 64. Okay, at most means, remember, less than or equal to. At least would be greater than or equal to, so make sure you take a note of that. 4n increased by means plus, and we're going to subtract 8 from both sides. So 4n, I'm going to do this because I'm subtracting. 4n is less than or equal to 56. Let's see how many times 4 goes into 56, because I'm dividing both sides by 4. 1. So you would then say that the number is at most 14. Okay, so use wording that goes very much like the original. And if it's an equation, you would find the number and you can put it in either words or just putting in the number. All right, then we have the metric system, and I believe someone wanted me to go back over this, so we're thinking about the things, the examples that I showed you on that one where I had pictures of the doorknob and pictures of various different things. Okay, kilo means 1,000. So there is 1,000 grams in 1 kilogram. The grams are the smaller unit. The kilograms are the bigger unit. So when you have a smaller unit and you're trying to, what you need to do is tiny ones. Looking at the little tiny ones, you are something that makes not so many of the really big units, because you have 2,850 of these little ones, and there's 1,000 of the little ones in the big ones. So that tells me you're going to divide by 1,000, and since the 1,000 has 3 zeros, the short way of doing that is move the decimal 3 places, so it becomes 2.850 kilograms. Because you move the decimal over 3 places. because you've got a smaller unit turning into a bigger unit. All right, meters and centimeters. Remember I said that there are 100 centimeters in 1 meter. I had a picture of the doorknob that was about a meter, and the centimeters are the smaller ones, okay? So each one of the meters has 100 centimeters in it. And there are 23 of these big things, so there will be more of the little ones. So in this case, you're going to be doing times 100. So 23 times 100 means 23, and I need to move the decimal over this way. So you have 2,300 centimeters is in 23 meters. Millimeters to centimeters. If you remember with our millimeter, our rulers, the centimeters are going, you count off by the ones, but then there's 10 little millimeters in each centimeter. So since there were 10 little millimeters in each centimeter, there's going to be more of these than there are of these. Okay, 10 millimeters in 1 centimeter. So what you need to do for this one is you're going to divide by 10, because there's more of the littles than there are of the bigs. So 865, you need to move the decimal over one place. We get 86.5 centimeters. And then over here, we have 2,500 milliliters. Remember, milli is another one that means 1,000. There are 1,000 milliliters in 1 liter. So the thing we need to think about is whether we're going to multiply or divide. The milliliters are the little ones because there's 1,000 of them in one of these. So that means that we're expecting there to be less liters. So 2,500, I'm going to divide by 1,000, which means you take 2,500 and you move your decimal place over 1, 2, 3. Whoops, it's a very sloppy 1, 2, 3, isn't it? Got right in the middle. Move your decimal over 1, 2, 3 to right here. So 2.5, and the trailing zeros can drop off, so 2.5 liters. Okay, so that's the things that you need to know about moving things for the decimal. It's always deciding, well, am I going to be multiplying or am I going to be dividing to do these things? And remembering the big ones, there's 1,000 grams in a kilogram, and that there's 10 millimeters in a centimeter, and there is 100 centimeters in a meter, and 1,000 milliliters in a liter. So that takes care of that. And finally, last topic, more word problems. These are the ones like when we did the part where we could work backwards. So you want to be able to work backwards in these type of problems. You can use an equation or not. Sometimes an equation doesn't really help you in that. So every 4 hours for the past 24 hours, your number of YouTube subscribers has tripled. If you now have 1,458 subscribers, how many did you have 24 hours ago? So really what we're going to be doing is every hour it tripled. So we're going to every 4 hours it tripled. So we're going to be going backwards. So 4 hours ago, which would be at the 20-hour mark, we would have to divide 1,458 by 3. I'm going to divide that by 3, and that'll give you 4 and 8 and 6. So 486 subscribers at 20 hours. 4 hours earlier than that, 16 hours, you would have to take the 486 and divide that by 3. So you'd have 1 and 6. Bring down the 6, and that will give you a 2. So 162 subscribers at 16 hours. At 12 hours, which is another 4 hours earlier, you're taking 162 divided by 3. So that would be 4. Nope, it would be 5, because 4 doesn't give me enough. So we're going to do 5. And then 12. That gives me 4, so 54. 4 hours before that, at 8 hours, we'd have 54 divided by 3. It's getting easier and easier. And that would give you 18 subscribers at hour 8. 4 hours before that, at hour 4, 18 divided by 3 gives you 6. And then at hour 0, when you first started 24 hours ago, 6 divided by 3 is 2. So you started with 2 subscribers. So there is a question that's sort of like that. Working backwards does help you. There's a working backwards in time type of thing. So this person was finished at 5:30, and we want to know what time they started their work. If they ended at 5:30, 5:30, not 5:50. And before that, they were reading. So you would take 30 minutes away from that, and that would take you back to 5 o'clock or at p.m. They did science for 90 minutes. Okay, so 90 minutes, well, that's more than an hour, isn't it? 90 minutes is 60 minutes, which is 1 hour, and another 30 minutes. This is a logic type of thing. So what that does is it takes you back to 4 o'clock, but then takes away another 30 minutes. So that would be 3:30. And it was 3:30 when they started the science. Then we need to back up the clock another 45 minutes. Okay, so this is 3:30. Well, if we go back to 3 o'clock, that would be 30 minutes, right? But we need to go 45, so we need to go even 15 minutes earlier than 3 o'clock. So to take 15 minutes earlier than 3 o'clock, that will be 2:45, because there are 60 minutes in an hour. So going back to 2:45, that tells you that Alex started his studying at 2:45 to do all these things and end it at 5:30. Okay, now here's an interesting thing. There's 23 packages of snacks in the closet. That's 3 more than 4 times as many kids in the family. How many kids are in the family? This one might lend itself more to a variable, like K equals the number of kids in the family. Okay, so 3 more than will be something 3 plus 4 times the number of kids equals 23 packages of snacks. So you could take away 3. That gives you 20 packages of snacks. And you have 4. And you divide that by 4. And we find out that there were 5 kids in the family. So that means that there's 3 packs of snacks left for your parent or your adult that is in your house right now, and they get the 3 packs, and the kids can divide up the others, I guess how that goes. But 5 kids in the family in this case. And I think, yeah, that is it. And if you can do all those things, you should be great for your test. I know I took a long time to explain it today, but I wanted to make sure. I would rather give you a long explanation and have you have more than you need than not enough of an explanation. So we're going to just end it right now. I'm praying, Jesus, please help them to do really well on this test that they study for. And I pray that in Jesus' name. Amen. Have a really good weekend, and hopefully we'll see you soon.